governments of the world, including Mali's, have taken measures to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. To achieve this goal, it is necessary that national and local plans, programs, and budgets reflect a strong political commitment to reduce gender inequality. Gender-responsive budgeting, GRB, is an approach that allows to achieve this goal by ensuring that government plans include programs that address gender gaps and that government budgets make necessary budgetary allocations to implement such programs. This in turn contributes to good governance, social justice, and equitable development. Mali recently joined those countries that have implemented GRB initiatives with the adoption of its national gender-responsive budgeting strategy covering 2011 to 2013. The purpose of this strategy is to integrate the strategic orientations of the national gender policy and the government's key commitments for reducing gender inequality in national and local development plans and budgets. In this regard, the main focus is mainstreaming gender into the Third Generation Poverty Reduction Strategy paper, PRSP, and the annual budget. The budgeting process in Mali follows internal and sub-regional standards, including the new harmonized framework for public financing, focusing on results-based management and multi-year budget programming. The key innovation of the process is that all planning and budgeting activities will hence be related to expected outcomes. In addition, the GRB process is another component of the innovation and part of the implementation of the National Gender Policy, PNG, adopted by the government in November 2010. An important part of the process is the adoption of a national gender-responsive budgeting strategy and methodological guidelines for its practical implementation. Another innovation is the extent to which these guidelines will be used and to ensure visibility on the government's efforts towards gender equality. The GRB process in Mali has benefited from the strong leadership of the government through the Ministry of Economy and Finance and the Ministry for the Promotion of Women, Children, and Family, in line with the national gender policy. As such, its implementation will bring a new approach against the inequalities between men and women. The gender-responsive budgeting is a crucial element to the national gender policy in Mali.
The Malian government adopted a national gender policy on the 24th of November 2010. The responsibility for its implementation is shared by all ministerial departments. In this regard, the leadership on gender-responsive budgeting is taken by the Ministry of Economy and Finance. GRB does not only constitute Strategic Orientation 6 of the National Gender Policy, but it is the backbone for the implementation of all the objectives of the National Gender Policy, because there can be no adequate planning without appropriate budgetary allocation.
The National Gender-Responsive Budgeting Strategy encompasses several major activities, which include framework training, the inclusion of affiliated department sectors, etc. The activities planned will be implemented in accordance with the adopted strategy. In the days to come, particularly in the framework of the 2012 budget, the first step will be to sensitize the stakeholders involved in the budget process and to present the GRB strategy, including officers in charge of budget formulation, credit administrators, and program managers. The next step is to provide technical support to sector-line ministries for the practical implementation of the strategy and to develop their ownership of the strategy. We are operating in the context of a harmonized budgetary framework. The objective is to plan and budget beyond the annual framework. Currently, we are working with the budgetary instruments such as the medium-term expenditure framework. The purpose now is to adopt existing tools to integrate the gender dimension and to promote its use in the different sectoral line ministries. The crucial projects and programs in Mali must take into account the National Gender Responsive Budgeting Strategy. Foremost, the Poverty Reduction Strategy Paper, PRSP, and the Economic and Social Development Project constitute the foundation for governmental action as well as the national plan towards reaching the Millennium Development Goals. The GRB approach must allow for these strategies to effectively combat inequalities between men and women. With the elaboration of the third generation Poverty Reduction Strategy Paper, PRSP, we have been committed to make gender more visible through a certain number of elements. This visibility is evident through the different orientations of the PRSP. The PRSP GRN link also appears at the level of priority actions. This is why it is important to ensure that all priority actions promote gender equality and women's empowerment, and they are adequately budgeted for. The PRSP contains several pillars and strategic orientations, but there are areas that require high priority interventions related to gender that must be evaluated in terms of cost and funds to be mobilized for its implementation. That is where GRB intervenes, to ensure that all gender-related planned actions and priority actions are mainstreamed in our policies and strategies, and funded to achieve the objectives sought. The third element is the monitoring and evaluation of indicators. The previous PRSP generations contained very few gender-related indicators. With the adoption of the National Gender Policy and studies undertaken by UN Women and other international organizations, we are now sufficiently prepared to effectively mainstream gender in the PRSP monitoring framework. These mechanisms must in turn allow for a more equitable distribution of services at the regional and local level and contribute to the recognition of women's rights at the institutional and individual level. Gender is not a function. It is not a nature of expenditure. Gender is a cross-cutting issue that is relevant to all departments and all areas of life. To date, there has been great difficulty, whilst analyzing the national budget and its annexes, to identify the different actions planned to implement the national gender policy. The GRB approach will allow us to ensure traceability, identify the measures needed to achieve gender equality, and to document them into a gender report. In my opinion, in the short term, this is the expected added value. The other aspect, since the GRB approach is a decision-making instrument, it will allow all sectoral line ministries and budget officers to better mainstream gender priorities in the implementation of sector policies. For the effective implementation of the gender-responsive budgeting, the Finance Commission of the National Assembly and civil society plays a critical role.
The Finance Committee reviews the draft budget law before its presentation at the plenary session of Parliament. In fact, the committee will be a strategic ally in this process once its members are fully sensitized and sufficiently prepared to maintain gender. The committee can also influence and make favorable decisions in relation to GRB and can make the government accountable on the gender-responsive budget.
Beyond the rhetoric and the nomination of women to key positions, Mali has taken a decisive turn towards women's empowerment. The GRB process will efficiently and equitably contribute to the sustainable social and economic development of men and women in accordance to the Millennium Development Goals. This initiative is supported by several technical and financial partners, in particular by UN Women, UNFPA, the Belgian Cooperation, the Canadian Cooperation, and the World Bank. In conclusion, gender-responsive budgeting is an approach that is designed to respond to certain gender disparities that still exist in Mali.